Hi, everyone. Welcome to the bazillionth Rouxbe Valentine's Day Essential Vegan Desserts event. I'm so excited to be doing this. It's been a great week in Philly. I hope everybody is well. And I've got so many good questions. I'm going to do some talking first, as I do, to introduce a couple of things that I've been thinking about, and then get right to the questions. I'm going to show you a video. Patrick is going to show you a video of how to make ganache, because Valentine's Day chocolate is very popular, although not everyone eats chocolate. So there are definitely choices. And I'm going to talk about egg replacement too. I see there are a couple of questions there. And certainly no eggs, great baked goods, great desserts, no problem. That's what Essential Vegan Desserts is about. I've been seeing, even on the Today Show this morning, there was somebody talking about egg replacement, and if you've been following me or working with me for a couple of years, you know that I say there's no one size fits all, and it depends. And I stand by that. So it hurts me a little bit when I see people saying, do this, when I think you could do better. So one of the most wonderful, exciting thing about Essential Vegan Desserts to me is that we take a really deep dive into the techniques. That's what Rouxbe does, foundational techniques, so that our students can learn what's real before trying different ingredients, because everything makes a difference. Now, before we get started, remember that there is a Q&A area for you. If you haven't put a question in, go ahead and do that. And students in Essential Vegan Desserts, if you have any problems with tech, or anyone in Rouxbe, just write to support@rouxbe.com. And if you have a question of not a technical nature, but an assignment nature, you can get in touch with me, Fran at rouxbe.com, and anybody here can do that. So I'm going to ask Patrick now to show you a couple of photos while I kind of tinker with the plug for my computer and see why it's not charging. Okay. So I sent a couple of photos to Patrick this morning because I wanted you to get an idea of some of our desserts. There is a beautiful tart there. That particular tart was done with Chef Carolina Molia of L'Artisan when I was mentoring her. And that one has an oat crust and a chocolate cream filling with the white is beautiful little dabs of aquafaba and some fruit. If you are a Rouxbe student, you may have, or certainly in Essential Vegan Desserts, we have a raw tart. So it's very variable. And this will just give you an idea of some of things that can be done. We have some other really lovely photos there. Truffles, which I love. And truffles are made using ganache, in our case, vegan ganache. And whether the ganache becomes a truffle filling, a truffle center, or a pouring cream for a cake, that depends on the formula that you use. So and then there is a beautiful photo of the plate with what look like confections. Those are actually nut butter filled dates dipped in high percentage chocolate with some strawberries on the plate that were made at Rancho La Puerta, where I teach. And we also had some mendiant, which is nothing more than melted chocolate. You might have some left over, and little bits of fruits and nuts that you may have. So you can enjoy those. There are a lot of questions, so I'm going to get right to it, but I want to show you a couple things first. Here, I'm going to put gloves on because these Tastes are going to be going to neighbors later, and I don't want to touch them with my bare hands. These are truffles, different kind of truffles. And this one, I think you can see when the chocolate was set down, instead of being set down on parchment paper, it was set down on something called a transfer sheet. And I'm going to show you one that I have for Valentine's Day. It just came, so I wasn't able to use it. This is a teeny, really a 2-bite piece of cake. This is actually the gluten-free brownie bite that was baked in a sheet pan. We have the recipe in the course, and I laid it on another piece of this transfer sheet. And this is so pretty. I was so pleased with the way it turned out. This is my chocolate orange tahini truffle, and I laid the ganache down on this transfer sheet, this design, not really thinking that it would take, and it did, and it's just beautiful. So truffles are always great. Ganache is always great for Valentine's Day or anytime. This is, truffles are typically round. I like them a little bit on the rough side so that they look like their cousins, the real truffles, the really expensive truffles, and you can coat them in cocoa powder. I've got one sitting right here, ready to be coated in some cocoa powder. You can enrobe them in chocolate, or I just took the ganache and put a piece of a tart cherry on top with a little gold dust. So there's lots you can do without tons of work, because do you want to be stuck in the kitchen on Valentine's Day or on any party day? I don't. And so everything that I showed you can actually be made ahead, Another thing that I made ahead is this little parfait. This is chocolate cake crumbs that I keep in the freezer. Maybe I have some leftover cake, or I torted a cake to level it. This is a cashew cream that was made solely with dates, whole dates, Majol dates, pitted, of course, and a little maple syrup. So it tastes like a maple date cream, almost tastes like caramel. It can actually be frozen into ice cream. I've got some pecans on there and a little bit of the cream that I didn't use for the date cream. Now, here are some, I know I see Chef Shar is here. She teased me when we first met about the size of my desserts, insofar as they're small. But when something tastes good and is made correctly, you don't need a lot. And this way you can have desserts and feel good about it. This is a gluten-free brownie bite. I've got some gold luster dust on it. And this is the same little brownie bite. But what I did was I turned it upside down and dipped it into ganache. And boom, I have what looks like a little cake. I could finish the side with nuts or anything that I want. So since I'm talking so much about ganache, and there might be someone here who doesn't know what it is, I'm going to tell you what it is, and then I'm going to ask Patrick to run video. Ganache is typically a percentage, it's a proportional thing of chocolate, typically non-vegan, heavy cream. Sometimes butter is added, sometimes other things are added, and they're emulsified together. You can get a pouring ganache, which will glaze a cake beautifully, or you can have a truffle center, as I showed you, depending on what you do. My truffles are not made with cream. They are not made with vegan cream either. I make most of my truffles with Oatly full fat or a nice rich plant milk. You could use a cashew milk too. And sometimes I do a water ganache. I've got This truffle sitting in here was made with blueberry syrup, and this is the bowl of it. And the orange truffles are made with orange juice, a little bit of tahini, a little bit of liquid sweetener. So there's lots you can do. Patrick, can you show the video?
This rich, intense chocolate glaze can be used for a variety of desserts. It can be used for dipping, as a sauce, or even to glaze a cake. To make the glaze, first gather your mise en place. Next, bring the milk and salt to a low boil over medium heat. As soon as the milk comes to a gentle boil, turn off the heat. At this point, pour the scalded milk over the chocolate all at once. Carefully rotate the bowl to ensure the chocolate is fully submerged. Cover the bowl with a plate and let stand, undisturbed, for approximately 5 minutes to allow the chocolate to slowly melt. The slow melt makes for a smoother ganache. When ready, remove the plate and gently whisk from the center out. Continue to gently whisk the milk into the chocolate, making sure to get around the edges so that all of the chocolate gets fully incorporated. As soon as the mixture is smooth and glossy, stop whisking. Overmixing can cause the ganache to become grainy. To test the final consistency of the ganache, pour a teaspoon or so into a small dish and place into the refrigerator for 15 minutes, or until it is set. When ready, the ganache should be smooth and firm, but still creamy like this. If the ganache is too firm, add a tablespoon or so of room temperature milk. If too thin, add some additional melted chocolate. Next, add the vanilla extract and oil. Carefully whisk from the center out until smooth and glossy. Allow the ganache to thicken at room temperature for 15 to 30 minutes. When ready, it should be able to coat a spoon with minimal dripping, but still be pourable. The finished ganache can be used as a dipping chocolate for things like cookies and cupcakes. It can also be used to glaze cakes. Here we first added a layer of ganache and then let it set, and then we finished it with a second layer for a simple yet sophisticated dessert. Here we drizzled some of the ganache onto the plate for decoration. It can even be drizzled onto a leftover cake to give it more life. If the ganache is left to set a bit or made a bit thicker, it can even be used as a spread or filling for a variety of desserts. In fact, this sauce is so versatile that it can even be used to make a decadent hot or cold chocolate milk.
I would like to point out a couple of key things with making ganache, and that is the bowl looked like it was chocolate chips. It is not. You need to use quality chocolate, not chocolate chips. Chocolate chips are heat-resistant chocolate with, generally speaking, a low. So in other words, they're not supposed to melt completely when you make chocolate chip cookies, and generally they aren't high quality. You can get chocolate that's already in little pieces like that. I've got tons behind me. And this is an example. This is my cookbook. So this is an example of a pouring ganache. If you allow the ganache to set, then it becomes thick like a frosting. You want the liquid to be hot enough to melt the chocolate, but not so hot that the cocoa fat, which is called cocoa butter, but it's not butter, it's the fat in chocolate, may come out and you have a mess. You can try emulsifying it if you have like an oil slick on top of your ganache. You can try emulsifying it with a hand blender or adding a bit more room temperature or even cold liquid, and that might help, but it doesn't always. So choose a chocolate that tastes good to you because you're going to taste that. the liquid can be infused, especially if you're using plant milk, can be infused with spices and herbs and all kinds of things. So this is something that can be made ahead, kept in the refrigerator or the freezer, and you rewarm it over a water bath. Don't let any water get into your chocolate, because then it will seize, and that's a whole other thing. Now, I want to remind people and remind myself that Valentine's desserts, or any holiday dessert, or even a daytime, today dessert, doesn't have to be chocolate based. And fruit forward desserts are always available in my home. I like roasted fruit, I like baked fruit, I like grilled fruit, and I love fruit gels. So that's something to think about when you're making desserts. But, consider component desserts. And by that, I mean, make your cream, make your ganache, make your cake, and then put everything where it should be. And you pull them out when the time is right. I see this in front of me, so I'm going to show it to you now. I showed you the chocolate that was done, the patterned on the transfer sheet. This came today, so I'm going to put some carefully melted chocolate. It need not be tempered, actually, onto this sheet. If you ever use these, one side is smooth. You want to put your chocolate on the side that's a little bit bumpy. Let it set up, let the chocolate set firm, and then carefully peel it off. They're really, really fun. So I'm going to go to some questions now. Char Nolan, Chef Char. Many of you know Chef Char, and I am so blessed to have Char in my life. I adore Char. Char is asking, what are the best egg substitutes for making a quick bread, a birthday cake, and a chocolate chip cookie? Very important question today because of the egg shortage or the exorbitant price of eggs. And this seems to be a result of the bird flu, which is a very dangerous situation. Now, I want to stress, we have an entire unit on egg replacement in essential vegan desserts. That's very detailed, but I'm going to give you some information now by pulling over this tray. There is no one size fits all. I will say that. Not everyone agrees with me, but I agree with me. This is ground flax, and it is when 1 tablespoon of flax and 3 tablespoons of water are mixed together, becomes gelatinous, and that will help to bind baked goods, to bind them, not to leaven them. This is ground chia seed. It will do the same thing. Now, I can only think of 1 or 2 recipes in my whole repertoire where I use flax or chia. I actually prefer chia. Maybe 3 recipes. And I don't always use water as a liquid. Sometimes I use coffee because I happen to love the taste of that. So it doesn't matter, but it's 1 tablespoon to 3 tablespoons of liquid. Some people say you can use yogurt. This is a plain yogurt. And this is empty, but it's got a little note in there that says aquafaba. So aquafaba is the liquid that chickpeas were cooked in. And you want to use unsalted. If it's been salted, your aquafaba, that's not going to be a good thing. Over my shoulder, no, right here, I whipped up some aquafaba earlier today for meringue. And, I love learning things, and you learn things by doing. I have, behind me, you can see I have a tilt head stand mixer. It's a Pro. And ordinarily I do my aquafaba in a bigger KitchenAid mixer, electric mixer, one that doesn't have a tilt head. And I find that it's got a bigger whisk and a heavier motor. And I find that it makes more aquafaba and it holds better. That said, I have students in the course who don't have electric stand mixers and they do this with a hand mixer. It's just tedious, but it's doable. To me, the most reliable egg substitute is baking soda, vinegar, and a bit of baking powder. And that goes all the way back to the days during wartime when people couldn't get eggs. And when I was left the traditional world to go in, try to create vegan desserts, there were none that were worth eating 30 some odd years ago, I thought about what did they do during the war? And there were cakes made with baking soda and vinegar, and the cakes rose really nicely. I figured I could do better, and I feel that I have at this point, but these are called chemical leaveners. I use aluminum-free baking powder. I use baking soda. Actually, the baking soda that I use is from Bob's Red Mill, and I use apple cider vinegar. And I find that gives the best rise to the cake, the best crumb that is actually equivalent to a good cake made with eggs. And I say good because not all conventional desserts are delicious. You might have noticed that. So Shar, I think a short answer to your question is, for a quick bread, I would use, I think a combination is best. I would use flax gel or chia gel and some extra baking powder and baking soda for a birthday cake. Definitely no flax, no chia, no aquafaba. I haven't been using that yet. We have a beautiful muffin in the course that is from a book by Jude Deber called Aquafaba, and that is made with a whipped aquafaba, so you can do that. And a cookie, you can use other egg substitutes are fruit and vegetable purees. So applesauce, for example, the applesauce, banana, prune puree, they have a lot of pectin in them and they help to bind a cake and add moistness. So I hope that helps, Shar. Diane is saying, so many recipes call for coconut oil and coconut milk. I prefer something with less saturated fat. I do as well, Diane, and I use very little coconut oil. There might be 1 or 2 recipes where I use that. I prefer to use extra virgin olive oil and sunflower oil in my desserts. And coconut milk has a place, but again, I use it rarely. I use it to make a vanilla pastry cream, for example. I prefer to make my truffle ganache, for example, and my cakes with a rich plant milk instead of coconut milk. So I think you can try that. Shar, hi Shar. Shar is asking, what is my thoughts on using aquafaba? Well, I think aquafaba is fabulous. Again, this is a meringue that I made. The first time I did this, I trained traditionally at the New York Restaurant School, and I heard about aquafaba, and I just really was thinking, I don't see how that's going to whip like egg whites. And I remember standing over the mixer just in awe because it does. But here's a tip that is in our course and in all the recipes that I provide for making a successful aquafaba meringue every time, and that is to reduce the aquafaba. That means to simmer it until some of the liquid is reduced and chill it. I store it in the freezer, and that will give you a reliable aquafaba. You use cream of tartar which is the same thing you would use. It's an acid when making an egg white meringue. And I use a superfine sugar, superfine cane sugar, which for me means taking organic, vegan, fair trade cane sugar and powdering it in my Vitamix. Now, I just think it's great. I do have a box or a package of a dried aquafaba powder coming to me from Canada, and I will let you know what it is. This is a dessert that I made quite some time ago. Whoops, the little dried lemons are coming off the plate. But I had leftover aquafaba meringue, which I probably will do the same thing with it. And you can make meringue cookies. So I baked them flat, more like a pavlova. Today I added some chocolate and then a little bit of leftover strawberry banana. It was actually a nice cream and it looks really good to me. Cindy is looking for tips for converting oil and butter in standard baking recipes, especially since everything plant-based in the stores contains oil. So Cindy and everyone, I want to say, first of all, that when you are converting a recipe from butter, dairy butter, to oil, you use only 3/4 of the amount. You don't use the same amount. And I'm reading between the lines, Cindy, so I'm guessing, but you can tell me if I'm wrong here, that you are looking for fat-free desserts. In other words, whole food, plant-based, no oil. And then I would say what you want to do is think about what I had said to Shar about using fruit purees, vegetable purees like bananas. And I don't mean that. Well, fruit purees, if you use banana, remember that it has a strong flavor. Applesauce is the most neutral, and I happen to love prune puree in chocolate desserts. So you can do that and see how it goes. But this definitely takes testing. So you want to take a recipe that you know works or that you'd like to convert, divide it in half, maybe divide it by 1/4, and start messing around. If you can use some of the fruit or vegetable puree and a little bit of oil in your recipe, that will give you the best mouthfeel. These little cupcakes, this is 24 cupcakes. There's 4 tablespoons of oil in the entire recipe. So I hope that helps. Misha is asking about, oh my goodness, is guar gum a good substitute for agar powder? She found a recipe for no oil plant-based butter that included agar, and she substituted guar gum. I see the potential, but yuck. I would say yuck. It is not at all a good sub. Guar gum is one of the vegetable gums that thickens, and agar is a seaweed and that gels. I often use agar in combination with starches like cornstarch or arrowroot, for example, but not with guar. So I would say yuck. I would say yuck. I'm sorry about that. Sylvia, I mean, here's the thing about subbing. If you're going to sub something, and I take, I like to try to adapt recipes, but I never do a full recipe if I'm trying something new. If I'm trying a new cake recipe, I bake most cakes recipes call for an 8 or 9 inch cake. I bought myself some 6-inch cake pans, and that's what I use. Sylvia's asking how to determine the process of whether to use chia flax or egg replacer as a binder in converting non-vegan desserts into vegan desserts. So Sylvia, I discussed that a little while ago when I was answering Char's question, but it's such an important question. And that is, they are different. If you're doing a quick bread or maybe a cakey cookie, you can go ahead and use some chia or flax gel. I find them interchangeable. I do want to say that too much flax in a recipe, or even I've I tasted it. Too much flax will make something taste fishy. So I think that's why it's good for you. But you want to be careful. And sometimes you need an egg replacer. Egg replacer can be baking powder, baking soda, and vinegar, or a commercial egg replacer. What you need to do is some testing, really. And, again, that's what we do in Essential Vegan Desserts, because I can't say to you, I wish I could. Use this here, use this here. I took a recipe that I really love. It's in my cookbook. It's one of those accidentally vegan desserts. It's a chocolate cupcake with a cream cheese filling. So I think they're called black bottom cupcakes. Some of you may have had them. And in my book, I use a little bit of chia gel in the cream cheese filling. I decided when more options became available, I divided the recipe, I divided it up, and I baked a third the way it was written with the chia gel, a third with an egg replacer, Bob's Red Mill egg replacer, and a third, I think, with whipped aquafaba. And they were all okay, and they were all different. So that's the most I can tell you, is that things are different. Joy has a question about xanthan gum. Is it a health risk? It's pretty, if you're purchasing prepared foods, and I think cosmetic, all kinds of things, it's really hard to not have xanthan in your life. When I use coconut milk, my milk of choice is Edward and Sons, and they have one called Simple that doesn't have any xanthan in it. So I think for me, I don't worry about it too much, because the amount I would be using is very small. But when there is a choice, I don't use, I leave the xanthan out. That said, one of our students, a plant-based pro graduate and Essential Vegan Desserts graduate, had a particular health issue, and she told me that all gums are particularly dangerous for this issue. And so I thought about it, and I was using it in the vanilla pastry cream along with agar powder. What I did was I took the xanthan out, and I just used more of the agar powder, and it worked great. There's a link, Joy, here to something that Dr. Greger, which I'm sure that many of you know who Dr. Greger is, has written about this. Terry says, my gluten-free daughter cannot tolerate oats, which are often used in gluten-free baking. Yes, oats are often used, and there are other things that you can use. Terry and everyone else, I put a link to a really terrific article from Bob's Red Mill that says if you can't have oats, if you can't tolerate oats. So for some people, oats get contaminated with gluten when they're growing or when they're stored. That's one of the problems. So you want to try an oat that is certified gluten-free. But there is a protein in oats that some people, a significant number of people who are gluten-free, can't tolerate. I would substitute rice flour, coconut flour, nut flour, and they should work fine. So why don't you have a look, Terry, at the article and see if it will give you some more guidance. Hi, Roseanne. Roseanne is asking, when making vegan ganache with juice or water, what is the chocolate to liquid ratio? So, Roseanne, I have seen ratios, formulas all over the place. I like to start with 1 part liquid to 1.5 parts of chocolate. And then do a test. If your ganache is too firm, add some more liquid. That's why you test things in a little teeny container. If your ganache isn't firm enough for what you're looking for, melt some chocolate and stir it in carefully. And also depends on what you're using it for. Are you using it for a truffle center? And do you want your truffle centers to be firm, or do you want to pipe them out and they're going to be really soft and enrobe them? And that's what I would say. So start with 1 to 1.5. But another thing is the ratio will depend on the kind of chocolate you're using. And by that, what I mean is a higher percentage chocolate. I typically use a 72 to 73.5% chocolate. That has more cacao solids and less sugar. If you take your ratio and you go down to a 50, 55, 60% chocolate, you're going to have a softer result perhaps with that ratio. Diane, hi Diane. Diane's asking if you're whipping aquafaba, what sweetener is best to use with it? As far as I'm concerned, there is only one sweetener that will make a reliable, sturdy meringue, and that is cane sugar. I use vegan cane sugar and I powder it finely. I get it to fine, or what some of you across the pond would call castor sugar, and that's what you use. The important thing is also to remember to reduce the aquafaba. A typical can will have between 2/3 of a cup and 3/4 of a cup of aquafaba. You want a half a cup. If you're cooking chickpeas from scratch, like I do in my Instant Pot, piece of kombu, and then no salt, certainly no garlic or flavors. And then I remove the chickpeas when they're finished, and I reduce the liquid, in that case, the aquafaba, by at least a half until it is more viscous. Okay, Sylvia. Okay, Sylvia likes Florentine cookies. Florentine cookies are super easy to make vegan. A typical Florentine recipe will be a small amount of flour, sometimes just 3 tablespoons, almond flour, let me think, brown sugar, honey, and they're very thin and very lacy, and butter. So you can swap out the dairy butter for vegan butter. You want to use a solid vegan butter. Never use a vegan spread when you're doing desserts. And it depends. Many vegans won't use honey. Some use local honey. You can swap out the honey with maybe rice syrup. Won't be quite as, rice syrup, maple syrup, agave. We do a vegan honey in the course. That's delicious. But that said, we have a wonderful, I like Florentines, and I wanted to see if I could develop a recipe for a very, very lacy Florentine-like cookie without using sugar, granulated sugar. And so our Florentines use a combination of rice syrup and maple syrup. Rice syrup has very particular properties. If you use it to bake a cake, the cake's going to be gummy, but it makes things crispy. And these cookies, when done properly, it's actually an assignment in the course. They are super lacy and really nice. So good luck. Okay, I have a question here about Madhurmia is looking for a recipe for a foolproof whole foods plant. I think you mean plant-based chocolate fudge cake, which you can serve as a dessert. Well, Some of you have heard me say it, but I will tell you that my chocolate cake to live for, which is the cover of the book that I showed you, but I typically do one layer. That is a tort. That's one way to have less dessert. That's satisfying. So I did that cake without any added oil for Rip Esselstyn's wedding. And if you know the Esselstyns, you can't get more whole food plant-based no for that. So that is a wonderful dessert. It's in the course, but if you Google Fran Costigan's chocolate cake to live for, you're going to find it everywhere. And it's just a 2-bowl cake. You don't have to worry about, I don't use odd ingredients. It's dry in one bowl, liquid in another bowl. Don't combine the liquid and the dry ingredients until you know that your pan is prepared properly and your oven is at temperature. And the only way you're going to know that is with an oven thermometer. P is asking, when using dates as a sweetener, are Diglett Nor or Medjool preferred, or a different type? Those are the 2 types available to her. Well, I like Medjool dates the best. I just like the flavor of them and I buy them in bulk. When I open up a date to pit it, I always look, because occasionally the one will be black inside and that's moldy. So that's something I want to remind you about. There are so many kinds of dates. My son and his family live in Los Angeles. And when we go to the farmer's market there, the date people have like dates like this. And I have had some that are even too sweet for me. So I would say you can use either. Oh, Anna Marie, I have a treat for you. So Anna Marie found a recipe for 11 Madison Park's granola on the New York Times cooking app. It's over the top yum. It calls for a 1/3 cup of olive oil. I use half that. Listen, I can't tell you whether to be concerned or not, but look at this. I got to go to 11 Madison Park for the most exquisite meal. So for those of you who don't know, this is Chef Daniel Hom had a restaurant, still has a restaurant called 11 Madison Park in New York City. He was very famous for his duck. During the pandemic, he rethought food. He had he had 3 Michelin stars at the time. He went completely vegan. Their whole entire restaurant, everything that's served, the drinks, everything is vegan. And he still has 3 Michelin stars. So I went there for a treat, and they sent everyone at my table home with this in this beautiful cloth bag and this bowl. And you can see that we've been munching on it, but this is their granola. It is delicious, but I will tell you that to me, it tastes like dessert. I'm used to granola that is less sweet. So that's what I say. In terms of you're asking, is there a substitute or should you not be concerned? That's up to you. I'm not going to tell you how much oil to have in your life. I mean, you don't eat that much granola, right? You just eat a little bit of granola. So if you like it the way it is, leave it that way. And if you want to make a half batch another time or a 1/4 batch and cut the oil back even more, go ahead and do that. Tony says, before going vegan, I enjoyed chalupas from Taco Bell. Do I have a vegan recipe? I have never had one, so I can't tell you, but I know what the components are, and it should be super easy to make a vegan chalupa. You can use vegan substitutes for the meat, for the cheese. Absolutely. Absolutely. Anna Marie has an interesting question. Well, one that I like to talk about, because again, switching ingredients, everything is going to make a difference. She says, hi, Chef Fran. Is there a difference between the types of thickening agents, such as arrowroot and cornstarch? Can they be used interchangeably? Does the amount need to be adjusted when switching? The amount of arrowroot and cornstarch are the same. They both are generally used as a slurry, which means you dissolve them in some liquid before you start. Not always. However, they are not interchangeable, and that has to do with, in most cases, and that has to do with the cooking time. One of my favorite recipes and a very popular recipe is my almost instant chocolate pudding. And cornstarch has to be used to make that recipe. If you use arrowroot, it gets like stringy, slimy. So you need cornstarch. Arrowroot thickens just under the boil. If you keep cooking it, it will thin out. Cornstarch has to cook for about 1 minute. Now, one of my students who cannot have corn, and I use non-GMO organic cornstarch from Edwards and Son. She can't have corn, and she told me that she used potato starch, and it worked really, really well. Tony wants to know, is there a dessert she can make using an Instant Pot and air fryer? Well, I make applesauce in my Instant Pot. I make baked apples in an air fryer. If you go to my website, francostigan.com, there is a cake there by Jill Nussenow from her book, Vegan Under Pressure. And it's terrific. It's terrific. So, yes. Diane says, I'm planning to buy non-toxic stainless steel cookie sheets. In the online review of those I've checked, there were complaints of warping. The way to prevent pans from warping is to get good ones, good heavy ones, or double them up. So my cookie sheets are not stainless steel. I've had them like forever. I line them always with parchment paper. They're heavy. So it has to do with how heavy the pans are. That's what you want. Hi, Diane has different Diane. The vegan sugars in my co-op, organic cane, coconut date, which to buy for what? Organic cane is the closest to typical sugar that you find in the supermarket. So it's going to be the most neutral and work closest to whatever recipe you're adapting. It is not as sweet 100% as what I call table sugar or supermarket sugar. It still has some of the molasses is retained, so it's not pure white. Organic coconut sugar, you want to rough that up, grind that, because it has a big crystal. That I use that in place of brown sugar, because to me it has that molassesy taste. And I use that. I wouldn't use coconut sugar in a vanilla cake, but I use it in a chocolate cake. I use it in chocolate pudding and so on. Date sugar I use for sprinkling. I find that date sugar, and you want to buy a super fine date sugar. It doesn't bake well and it tends to burn. And so that's what I would say about that. Hi, Demetra. Demetra is one of our one of my Rouxbe colleagues. Demetra would like to add Eagle's green coloring icing to my traditional Valentine's Day vegan butter cookies. Fly, Eagle, fly. Okay, I have my Eagle shirt under here. It's been very exciting in in Philadelphia. That's for sure. My kids are just amazed that I've become such a sports fan, but I moved here. I moved from New York after a lifetime in New York to Philadelphia 8 years ago, and they won the Super Bowl then. So, Demetra, this company, Suncor Foods, has really nice vegan food colorings that aren't chemical. And this is going to give a bit of a taste because it's the pandan leaf, but it's really, really nice. Or you can try some matcha as well. Let me know how that goes. I love vegan butter cookies, and I'm excited for the Eagles, and the parade is Friday on Valentine's Day. Maria is asking if I have a favorite nut to use in chocolate chip cookies. I like walnuts when I make them to bring to my daughter. I leave walnuts out because she doesn't like walnuts. So any nut that you like, nuts are interchangeable. That is super easy. That is one thing that is very, very interchangeable. So the one that you like. I'm going to try to get through the rest of these questions. So I'm going to go a little quicker. Coconut is being used everywhere. Is it overhyped as a health food? There are many of us who don't think coconut is a health food at all. So, you hear things. I would say don't believe everything that's out there. Go to a reliable source. Diana's asking, can you make the ganache without oil? Absolutely. There's like 2 teaspoons of oil in that bowl of ganache that makes 2 cups. It's there for shine. You don't have to use it at all. Cindy, same thing. You don't have to add the oil to ganache. What you have to do is use a good chocolate. Diane wants to know if I made my own blueberry syrup. This is the first time. This was like an experiment I had in my head that I wanted to try blueberry syrup ganache. I can't say why, but I will say that my neighbor, Kathy Gold, who's a chef, I asked her to taste it because after tasting a lot of things, sometimes I don't trust my palate. She went crazy for them. So I made it. I cooked frozen organic blueberries with a small amount of sugar. And then I strained and I kept the syrup and I used the blueberries in something else. Diane wants to know where I get my transfer sheets. There are so many different places. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them in all the pastry shops online. Chef Rubber has gorgeous transfer sheets too. If you just want a few, you might be better off with Amazon, but they're around. And cookware stores used to have them too. My favorite online shop is no longer there, but they're really great. Devora says, I see many chefs using black gloves. Can you describe what they are? They're just food service gloves, and they are supposed to be chemical free. And so I like them. I like them. Regina wants to know, how do you know when you need to temper chocolate? Well, tempering chocolate is a whole live event. But, if you temper chocolate, you're going to get a nice snap. It's a whole process of changing the temperature up and down, up and down. I've been keeping my eye on this the whole time. So these were kept in the freezer and then the refrigerator and then at room temperature, and they're still nice and shiny. So that's something. If you're making candy, you probably need to temper chocolate. Cindy wants to know, what ratio of apple cider vinegar, baking soda, and baking powder do you use for each egg replacement? Cindy, it depends on the particular cake. That's really all I can say about that. Usually it's a teaspoon. Well, I can't say that. I think my chocolate cake, I don't have it in my head, is 1 teaspoon each of baking powder and baking soda and a tablespoon of vinegar, but I might be wrong. So that by itself isn't the only egg replacer. That helps. Jill says she's been using coconut powder, much less fat. Where'd you order the aquafaba powder from in Canada? I don't actually know, Roseanne. The company got in touch with me, and I will let you know next month because I don't know. I know that I had used a brand, and I don't even remember the name anymore, and I didn't like it. Cheryl's looking for butter replacement for Southern biscuits. Got the buttermilk substitute down pat with almond milk and vinegar. My favorite biscuits are drop biscuits, which don't have any butter in them, but you should be able to use any good vegan butter. Carol wants to know, how do you determine the baking time when you reduce a baked dessert recipe by quarter? If what you want to do when you're doing a test, you want to maintain the depth that the original would be. So the baking time, cut it back by about a third, but start checking. Sometimes I just make a couple of cupcakes. So that's what you have to do. You have to really pay attention. Don't leave the room. and and then take notes. Take really detailed notes. Diane says she received a bag of cacao nibs. I use cacao nibs as a walnut substitute for people who are allergic to nuts. They have that a little bit of a chocolate taste, flavor, but they also are a little bit bitter. And I find that works great. Works great for walnuts. Well, those were some really fabulous questions. Thank you all so much. I want to wish everyone a very happy and healthy Valentine Day, Galentine Day, Love Day. We could all use some love right now. And I hope I will see you again. My next live event is going to be April 1st, April Fool's Day. And that's going to be more about subbing eggs. But as always, all your questions are welcome. So thank you again for being here. Take care, everyone. Bye.